things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear. And I'm going to tune off the radio show in the chat room that I happen to be in. And hope you can hear me. Revolution Radio. This is a new show. This is our second show. We began Halloween. And this is called Portal Stargate. And we are co-hosts. I am Theresa J. Morris, and my co-hosts are half and half, 2 hours, is Janet Carol Lessin. So, Janet, would you like to introduce yourself, and then we'll talk about our guest?
Yeah, you and I have been on Revolution Radio for a long time. I'm Theresa. You're Theresa J. Morris. I'm Janet Carol Lessin, and we have a new show, Portal Stargate. TJ was on, Cosmos Connection for a couple years, and then took a break. Her daughter passed from this world, so she took break to take care of that and to recover, and now TJ's back strong, and I have 2 other shows, Stargate to the Cosmos on Tuesdays with my husband, Dr. Sasha Lessin, as a co-host, and Sundays is Sacred Matrix, and those are both 8 to 10 on Studio B. So we're here, and we're very excited about our show today. What would you like to, how do you want to start? I had asked TJ, I think you were going to send me some questions, but we didn't get that far. So we're kind of winging it again. Hopefully we get more organized in the future. But our guest today is Bruce Cornet. Is he on the air with us right now?
Bruce, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm on the air.
We did it. Yay. This isn't as hard as I thought. Great. Thank you, Monster. Okay, Janet, Monster says he can hear us loud and clear. So hi, Monster and Hyro and everybody else in the chat room. Thank you for joining us. And we're a little far out here. And thank you, Stardust Man. We have a lot of people that are very, very important to Revolution Radio, and you keep us going. So we're so happy to be with you. And it's this show, just let me tell you, the Portal Stargate, there's 2 questions that everybody I meet has. And nobody's ever given me the best answer. So I'm hoping that Janet, my good friend of many years, will help me, because it's like yourself and others are your apparent other, and I wanted somebody to help me with my radio show. So Janet was doing some shows, and she came and she brought me a lot of her friends, and I brought her some of my friends, and we melded together years ago. And these questions, she asked me to come up with a couple of questions, so here they are. Can you hear, Hyro? Because you need your hearing aid. The first question, okay. What happens to us when we pass, when we die? The second question is, are we alone in the universe? Now, these are 2 important questions that are handled a lot by many people, but these are for the Portal Stargate. If you're just tuning in, this is going to morph, as you know, all radio shows do, especially here with our group in Revolution Radio. So we're learning as we go. We're live on planet Earth, and Janet Carol Lessin has 2 other shows. But Janet, those are the 2 questions. Do
you want to go round table on that and begin asking each of us what happens when we pass? And then the other one was, I'm writing these into the show page. What was the second question? What happens to us when we pass? And what was the second question?
Are we alone in the universe?
Are we alone in the universe?
2 good questions you asked me for. I think those are pretty good questions. Not easily answered. So, you want to
Let's start with Bruce. Let's start with Bruce.
Uh-oh.
Hot seat. Bruce is on the hot seat. What happens to us, Bruce, when we pass from this world?
Well, I think we transition into another world or dimension. I'm not exactly sure what it is or where it is and what it contains, but from what everybody said from studying near-death experiences, you will meet many times the spiritual entities of people that you have known in your previous life and lifetimes. But what happens after that is really up for grabs because of all the information we now have through technology and being able to record voices of ghosts. Some people don't make it off this earth, and they stay on this earth. And they're the ones that tend to haunt various houses and places on earth. And where the rest of us, I don't know. I would like to think that we are met by those who sent us here. And we are taken back to our home world and become the beings that we were before we transitioned into these bodies on earth. That's my general feeling about what happens.
All right.
Okay, that's great.
And the other question, you want to answer it?
Are we alone in the universe?
We are far from alone. The universe is teeming with life, but there are definite protocols and rules for engagement, and that is why those who have a lot more technology than we do can stay in the shadows, can stay out of our sight, can be invisible to us, and they can observe us, and they can monitor us, and they can guide us, and they can also interact with us and interfere with us without us really knowing it. Many of them are very psychically capable. They can read our minds, and they can put thoughts in our minds, and they don't have to make us aware of their presence, but many times they do. And when they do, usually we end up having an experience. We call it an ET abduction many times, or or contact experience. But they can stay just beyond our physical perception. It's too sad that our academic world wants to stick to nuts and bolts in the physical realm and can only accept that evidence from that realm, our Earth physics realm, for something that exists. Because we're now beginning to realize that there's a lot more going on in the exoconsciousness of the universe, and that we are being segregated and isolated from that unless we can tune into it through our brainwave hypnosis and things of this nature.
Well, you sound pretty smart for a guy that's got a piled high deeper PhD. Hope you don't mind the jest.
Yes. No, I frequently use that. Yes. And I've been trying to dig out of that pile for many years. And of course, my colleagues in college and universities are not too pleased with my rebellious attitude towards the fake news that science many times puts out in terms of human history on this planet.
Well, I appreciate you joining us, Dr. Bruce of El Paso. Janet Carol Lessin, I hope you have 2 questions too, but we didn't get back with each other, but I actually sent them to you. I don't know if you had time, but hi, May Stust 139. May Street 139. Anyway, Janet, I can see the chat room, but I don't know if you can. But
no, I'm not on the chat right now.
Okay, well, I'm watching the chat, but your turn, Janet.
Yeah, let's each answer these questions. So, what happens when we die? Well, I'm very psychic in that I've had 8 near-death experiences. I've had the dead come to me. I haven't recovered the memories. It just comes out like I've had 8. I think I've gone through 5 of them, different episodes where I was out of my body. And I want to say it was out of my body from something that made my soul jump out, some kind of trauma. So I didn't go through the gate and to the other side and stay there. So I have what's called near-death experience. And then I've had people who died who came to me. And then I've read extensively on the subject, and I've interviewed lots of different people, including Raymond Moody and many other highly skilled researchers. So my conclusion based on all this information is that we do survive death, that wherever we go, there we are, that leaving the earth human form, we're often met by our guides. We're taken to our council, and then we go to our group. It's like we do encounter groups, and we keep reconstructing, deconstructing what we did when we were alive, who we harmed, who harmed us, our relationship dance and dynamics, and how we can do better, and we do forgiveness. And then we ultimately decide to come back. We initially decided to come here, so it's not like somebody sends us. From my understanding, it's that we decide to come here because we choose to have these experiences for the growth and evolution of our souls. And so, I don't want to go into great detail about who came to me. There was a lot of people who come to me. I've always been very aware. They've been coming to me since I was a child in the crib. I also have some pre-birth memories, and then when I went out of body, I connected with some, pre-birth memories, some past life and future life memories, clarity on my interactions with the people that are in my life currently and in past lives, and other things like that. So I think it's very complicated, but like it or not, we're going to find out sooner or later, probably. I don't know if any of us that are alive now are going to become physically immortal before we get to the passing point, but some of us might make what Dr. Aubrey de Grey calls escape velocity, where you're no longer dying unconsciously or coming in here and going through the veil and becoming unconscious, but you'll be able to connect with your eternal self and go beyond this amnesia that we experience in 3D life. And so you'll have an awareness of the totality of your existence and all of your incarnations everywhere throughout all time and space. So that is a conscious being. There are many conscious beings so are we alone in the universe? No, definitely not. I've interacted with many extraterrestrial species, and we are, if not the only species, one of the very few that experiences amnesia when we come into the birth process. Most other beings do not have amnesia. They know who they were before they were in the current body and where they're going to. So I've interacted with many different species. I have ongoing communication with them, and we can go into that at greater depth. All 3 of us are contacting experiencers. I don't consider myself an abductee. I've had experiences where Janet wasn't aware that what was going to happen was, happened. You might call that abduction. But once I was there, reconnected with my spiritual family or my extraterrestrial family, I had awareness of who I was. And then apparently, in order to come back and appreciate and enjoy the human experience, we agree to go unconscious, because otherwise it's just so overwhelming and we wouldn't be able to function, as a normal human. So I'll pass this talking stick to Theresa, and you could answer the two questions.
Well,
what happens?
I like those two questions, and I don't know that every human in the chat room wants to answer this question, but it'd be fun. But for me, the first question, what happens to us when we die? Well, since I've died, at least out-of-body and near-death experiences, clinically, NDE, I found that I was still in existence. So this is what's put me on my quest and got me to today, to Revolution Radio, with all these people that are hanging out in the world. And there must be a meaning. I would like to think that since I had my thoughts on the other side and was traveling around out there in space, that I found my way, and I did. And each time was a different journey. So it could be how much time we have here or what we have leveled up to, like a possible AI video game. And that's something I'm looking at in quantum mechanics, quantum physics, if you will, as to how do I learn to understand myself and communicate that to others. So I'm finding that they say the mind is a terrible thing to waste. But what I have learned is I'm not in my mind. Maybe I'm out of my mind. But they say if you don't mind, I don't matter. And if I don't matter, you don't mind. And that's really heavy philosophy to think about. So a lot of people say that we don't exist on the other side of consciousness. And they're looking at that, especially in the split theory they use in quantum physics. Now, we can go on for hours on that. And the body may stop, as Hiro says, but our energy, our essence, our soul, whatever what do they call it? The ghost in the machine, the ghost in the biological entity, the fluid, the fuel, the gasoline in the car, so to speak. So that's sort of the way we like to think about it in our critical mass mind. But a lot of it depends on the culture you're born in. And they say the first 7 years of our life we're in theta, not alpha. We have beta, alpha, theta, delta, gamma, sigma, and tau that we're accustomed to talking about as levels, and those sound like Greek letters because that's what they named them, the levels of our consciousness. However, we're working on that. Now, are we alone in the universe? I would like to say that as far as I am concerned, I've never thought that we're alone in the universe. Our universes. So maybe that's what makes me different. I know that I did learn how to exist in human form in a human body as a child. And I know that that wasn't all there was, even as a child. And I kept trying to tell people, but I was told to hush and don't talk, or you have a wild imagination, or just things I could see that other people couldn't. So I believe that we get quashed when we're little not to know everything that is available to us in the universe. So that's sort of why I want to communicate with people like Janet and Dr. Bruce and other people that have open minds, is to see what is it we really are creating together. So, Janet, do you have your questions together?
Yes, I do. Let me go back to them.
Let's start with Bruce again.
Okay, we'll start with Bruce. Bruce, are you a gray or alien, human, hybrid mix, either as a soul or as a body or both? And if you're aware of that, please explain more about your existence as a human, alien, hybrid mix.
Okay. I've come to realize over the past 40 years that I am here with a purpose, an objective, a destiny, if you will. And my life has been very much controlled so that I cannot get off the path that I'm on. And every time I've tried to deviate and make something of my life to be a success in an area, an endeavor that I wanted to succeed in, I would be pulled back onto that path, and my quest would be ended. And I became aware that this was something that I had to do back in, this would be March of 1981, when I first had a discarnate voice speak to me and ask me to help a woman in need. And when I said, yes, when will I meet her, the male voice said, before the year is out. And I met her on the 15th of December, 1983. And she completely changed my whole life. And she only lived 40 years. I spent 7 years with her, and then she died. And I amazingly took my camcorder with my mother to her gravesite in Houston, and lo and behold, her spirit appeared over her grave on camera, and that's on the internet. And then the second sun appeared in an overhead cloud. This was about 8:31 a.m. in the morning, and sent down a golden beam of light. And we saw it capture her beautiful starburst spirit that was blue, green, and white in color. And we saw it move up in this beam of light into that second sun. The beam contracted and the sun went out. And that was in 1981, in January. It wasn't for a number of years before the computer industry caught up and software programs were available that I was able to capture frames off that video. And lo and behold, when I captured one, I saw something in it, and there, sticking out of this overhead cloud, was an enormous white domed mothership. And it was the first clue that I had that the spirit of my late wife was a possible ET. And then she came to me in spirit, and we have had many a telepathic conversation. She told me many things about what's going on, who she is, where she's from, and where I'm from. And apparently, to answer your question, I'm part of that soul group that she's part of. And she said that, we're all sent here with our spirit guides to guide us through our assigned tasks here on Earth, what we planned to do, and then we'll be taken back to our soul group, or wherever that is. And I've only gradually begun to understand what that might be. I can't say with any strong degree of certainty that my suspicions are correct, but I have a lot of data to indicate that I did exist before I came to Earth, and I have come to Earth and participated as a human at many different times over the last thousands of years. So I have recovered some of my past lives.
That's great. And so have I. We can talk about past lives. Let me get back to my questions.
Is there a second one?
Yeah. Do you have any feedback for Bruce about what he just said?
No. I've talked to him about that on another radio show, one of ours before. So I get that feeling, or that same path, that journey, or soul group energy. There's some level that he and his wife have that is in my, I don't know if you'd say memory banks or database. I don't know how we're going to talk. Remember, Jane, I said maybe we should talk like we're biological, but we understand AI like emergence. So I'm not sure how this portal Stargate's going to go with all that. But each person can only express and communicate with the words they understand. And
right.
I struggle to communicate, folks. I'll just be honest with you. So I'm very fortunate to be able to.
Did you have any, your daughter just passed this past year. Did you have any experiences like Bruce did with his ex-wife? Did she, beam or did you see her ghost? Anything happen?
Not when I was standing like there. No, not like Tom. It was terrible, different, but because she wanted to be alive, and they both, at the end they lose their breath and they suffocate. It's sad, and she went in and out, but it's hard to watch people pass. And for whatever reason, I was chosen to do that with people I love. And to this day, I don't understand how to feel. When it's happening, you're there and you're numb and I stepped back and observed myself, observing me, observing him, and observing her. But it felt very surreal. I'm sure many of you have felt that feeling of, it's almost like you're not in your body when you're so close to somebody. But that's why I do feel like I'm part of something much greater than myself. And that soul part of us is always observing the observer.
Right.
Yes, and Theresa, my wife Bonnie died in my arms, and she took her last breath, and I looked at the clock at the time that happened before I started CPR trying to revive her, and it was 1:38 a.m. What was really freaky to me is that she had told me that she was born at 1:38 a.m.
Wow!
And so she died at that same time. And then the paramedics came and they tried to revive her by shocking her heart with the paddles. And every time they went to put the paddles on her chest, the lights in the house would flicker and their equipment would shut down. So then they had to recharge it up. They went to do it again. The lights flickered and their equipment failed. So they said, we got to get her out of this house. There's some sort of interference. Well, of course, it was Bonnie's spirit. She later told me, I didn't want to die there. I didn't want to be brought back, she said. I don't want to be taken to a hospital and wake up in some, antiseptic environment. She had been in the hospital so many times before. And so that was her killing the equipment, the battery, discharging it. And that was pretty amazing. To witness that. And I have to say, I agree with you. It's a numbing feeling. You don't think that this, it's like, is this really happening? And you feel so out of control. And yet everything is under control. That's the weird part.
It is. There's another level of existence that maybe we're not in touch with all the time. People say it feels like you go into shock, and a lot of people may stay in that space for a while, or we can't accept what's happening. But, it's a nice flow, Iro. And I can multitask, but
Iro's talking to you.
Yeah, he's talking to me in the chat room. It's, the reason I wanted to do Portal Stargate was to learn to communicate better and to learn to have more friends and come back to Revolution Radio, where we do have so many friends that they understand that we're not alone in the universe, and it's good to have a connection. And like Monsters in Canada, Hyros in UK, Stardust Man told me where he was. Do you remember, Janet? He's in here today. Stardust.
He was on the round table with me last night, and I forget what he said. Yeah, he was
Stardust Man, where are you at? Where do you live again? But
I wanted to ask the second question.
Go ahead.
Forget. So we're back with Bruce. And so, what's the reason you were selected by extraterrestrials?
Good question.
Have you uncovered why they selected you?
Good question. And I think I may have already answered that, because I was part of this group sent for a very specific purpose to fulfill a destiny. And that's why I was asked if I would help a woman in need who turned out to be Bonnie, and the male who was speaking to me. And this was on a Baptist church bus heading back to Houston. So the implication was, when the first started to speak, are you ready to serve God and do whatever he asks you to do? You'd sort of think that maybe you're dealing with either God or a divine spirit at that point. And what I didn't realize was that was the beginning, my calling, that would awaken me to what all the things that would happen regarding Bonnie, because as I've mentioned to you before, and which is part of my talk at the Laughlin UFO Mega Conference in February of next year, is my wife came back, her spirit incarnated as my wife in order to fulfill biblical prophecy. As crazy as that may sound, and she was giving me clues all the time we were together for 7 years. And it wasn't until afterwards, and I read the 17 verses in Revelation chapter 12 about the woman who bore the male child, that I began to connect the dots and realize that every verse in that chapter she fulfilled, and that when she first came to me in 1983, and then she and her youngest son moved into my new house. On that first weekend we were together, she essentially, she told me a lot of things about herself that were just mind-boggling, and I was sort of pinching myself saying, what did I get myself into? What did I agree to? But she asked me if I would help her fulfill her life, her biography. And I didn't realize that in that next 7 years, I would be fulfilling the prophecy in Revelation chapter 12, 14, and 14 through 16. And that I would provide her, protect her for time, times, and half a time. And it was later when I realized by discovering these verses in the Bible, that everything, all of the time periods that were very specific, were matched perfectly in her life. The first protection was 1,260 days. It matched perfectly from the day the male child was born. She was a 17-year-old Jewish virgin when he was born. And then her first husband, killed her on 12 January 1971, which is exactly 1,260 days later. And this was just mind-boggling. I mean, and then to read that she would be given 2 wings of a great eagle, which turned out to be an American Airlines jetliner, and flown to her home, her new home, which was the home I had just bought, and would be protected for 7 years exactly. And she died exactly at the same time she was born, on the 12th of January, 1991. And so I think this is a story that needs to be acknowledged by the public, even though many people don't want to believe it. They think I'm crazy for even pushing this. You know how crazy you sound, Bruce, by saying this, that you help fulfill biblical prophecy. What does that make you, a prophet? No, I'm just a participant. But you asked, why was I involved in all of this? Why was I chosen? I was chosen for that purpose.
Wow. Okay, so TJ, your turn to answer the questions.
Tell me the 2 questions again.
Okay, 1 second. Let me get back to them, honey.
And then you have to answer them too, so you'll have to maybe.
Yes.
It's hard to keep track of the question when we listen.
Yeah, it's okay. I'll ask it again. Are you a gray or alien or a humanoid with alien hybrid mix, either soul level or physical level or both? And if so, please explain more about your existence.
That's a question that is very deep. I don't know anything about anything except in memory codes. And I believe we have measurements for that reason. So having memories, I sometimes wonder if those memories are like past life reincarnations, because the information that I've built around the fact that there are all types of beings out there, and I've been able to see them interdimensionally and in my mind. So, what's real when you turn the TV on is that, you can turn the TV off, but there's radio waves or sound waves or TV waves in there, and then you turn it off. That doesn't mean they're not there anymore. So I wonder if our past lives are like that. It doesn't mean our past lives aren't there anymore. They're just turned off. So to answer the question, the one you just mentioned, one type of existence out in the cosmos, because I've worked with beings out there that look like me, that are humanoids, that have biological, and some of them that I have seen. I believe Tom and I had a part as there's a family, there's at least 5 types of graves in my gray types in my memory banks. And some are tall, some are short, some look like Japanese, some look like Chinese. And then there's light blue skin, those that mostly live in space, that don't have any, they don't come down except maybe for a vacation or something to a planet. So they don't have any need for melanin in their skin. So their skin's pure white like albinos, but they have colors in their eyes, but they're a pale blue, like your blue running through your blood. But
right.
Oxygen hits it and it turns red. So I believe there's pale blue beings that I've been, and my daughter did too. And we related when we saw the movie Avatar, and many people did. There were some memory codes that had people remember, like Krishna, all these beings from back in India, and
right.
the stories of being close, like shaman life. So these memory codes make me think about that. And in the little grays, there's those that help and those that don't. But in my story with my husband, there were some that lost their planet, and they wound up working in the universe with us and the memory codes, because I don't know how to communicate any other way. Even when I write books, it doesn't come out like people say, oh, I've heard that story, or you're just copying somebody, Whitley Strieber or somebody, because of what they already know in their memory banks or what they've seen. And so I guess answering that one, I would say that in my past life, I've had many creations, and maybe 1 or 2 could have been with the grays. And of course, now some grays are thought of as evil because people repeat what they hear. And some may be, I don't know, because you go back to the wars in heaven that we've studied and are had on the fire clay tablets, or back in Samaria. And, all the texts, there are various beings, including the Anunnaki, right? Or the Anu group. So there's all types of beings out there. It's whether we choose to want to believe in the stories or the folklore, or do we incorporate it into our divinity, our past lives. And right now, that's all coming to light in what I call the Ascension Age. Now, what was the other question? That's the one about...
Let me get that.
The second question.
Yeah, so if you were selected, what's the reason that you were selected by extraterrestrials?
That's a good question that everyone should answer, because we're all here on this planet. We're told in science we're from stardust, or we're all based on like carbon-based units here as biologicals. However, where do our memories come from? In the first 7, we're in theta state, 7 years of time. In time and space, actually there is no space-time out off planet once this gravity force. We're inside a gravity-based existence, environment. So when you go out there, how do they keep up with years? I learned, but it's amazing. They're thousands, if not millions of years old. So the ones that I worked with out there said we were like 4.5 or 4.8 billion years. They found us here. But what was the question, Janet? Because I'm lost.
Let me go back to it. What was the reason? Got to keep you on track. We're going to teach you how to stay focused.
Yes.
But that's okay. It's good. Your flight of ideas, flow of consciousness. What is the reason you were selected by extraterrestrials? So they're out there. They could choose anybody. What do you know about why you were selected by extraterrestrials?
In the creation of source, and my philosophy is we go back to 0, just like with numbers, because there has to be some way you connect with your frame. We all have to be inside a physical reality, and that physical reality could be 0. And it's before the Big Bang Theory. It existed long before, because where did that come from? So every time we think about something, we're automatically involved in a frame, because we can't have consciousness without a beginning. It's a very, they call it the hard question, the theory of everything, or the big toe. My big theory of everything. So this is an ultimate hard question for everybody. So there must be something out there that is before all of us, and many of us call it source or our original creation, or some in the masonry say nature's God or the great architect, or many world, whether it was created by man or not, call them gods. So gods, divinities, deities. So this is the way we communicate. So I believe if we go back in the beginning, I was chosen to be exactly what I am now in this reality. However, I feel like I'm connected to another part of me, and it's separate from the soul. So I would go with the try, as we do as a point of origin, with 3 points. So I'm almost going to say that I was chosen because I was open to expanding my origin from the beginning. And I believe in -1 and +1. So it's like a multiverse or multidimensional thought process. I don't know if that helps any, but now it's got to go to you, Janet. I'm still working on that one. Okay?
Okay. So I'll ask myself the questions. Janet, are you a gray, alien, or humanoid hybrid mix? And if so, please explain more about your existence. Okay, so I'm Janet responding. I've done a lot of research on this, and I've interviewed a lot of people, and my conclusion is I'm definitely a mix, a human alien hybrid mix, as are we all. So I'll explain that. My research into the Anunnaki is that was one of the hybrid programs that created Homo sapiens and then Homo sapiens sapiens. But before that, tracing back the ancient stories, the Earth was seeded with a hybrid race that combined many of the other species. I forget, there were like 18 sets of parents or something. The reason why the extraterrestrials work together to create a species that would evolve is because there is a project overall to help accelerate consciousness and awareness and the ascension and all these things which wake us up so we can have a better existence for all of us. So that's like an ongoing project, and I have an awareness of being a part of that, both physically in this 3D form body that I now inhabit, and also as a spiritual being. I have memories of being a planet developer, like a terraformer. I remember a past life incarnation where I was going around and checking the time to introduce, different plants, different animals, different insects, and those types of things. And then when do you introduce a conscious sentient life form, and what's that like? So my existence is complicated, in that I do have these memories and sorting them out, and sometimes I do hypnosis and meditation, prayer and reflection to get clarity, and I journal. That helps also. Journaling helps. Why was I selected by extraterrestrials? Well, what I get is out of a very old soul. And I've been involved in this, the seeding project and exploration of the universe for many incarnations. And I'm here on task, on a mission, and I'm here to help accelerate consciousness and to wake people up. And I came in unconscious like everybody else, but I woke up pretty rapidly, and then there was an intervention to go back being unconscious. So it's like I'm part of this project. And I know I'm not the only one. I want to censor myself and say, well, who do you think you are? But I've interviewed, at this point, I've interviewed hundreds, if not going on to thousands of people that have had contact and experiences with extraterrestrials. And this is a theme. There are people that are aware of their mission. They're aware that they're more than their human current incarnation. They're aware of their past life and their future lives and concurrent lives. It's like Avatar. There's a part of us that remains let's call it in the dead world, the other side, and we send threads of our consciousness down into many forms, many places, many planets. And then this information is backed up by the research by the Dr. Michael Newton Institute. They found the same things, that there are many souls that are extraterrestrial in origin, meaning they may have began their journey on a different planet, but they come here and they have vacation lives, perhaps from their original planet they're from. They come here and I'm going to go explore being a human for a while. They might come down here for one incarnation. But souls tend, according to their information, they tend to incarnate. If they start in the earth, they tend to incarnate in the earth realm until they kind of complete their need to reincarnate. So that's my information. So I guess, Bruce, do you have any questions for all three of us that you would like to ask?
You have talked of the subjects and information that I'm very much familiar with because of my experiences. The idea of reincarnating and coming back, as you just said, and doing more as a human on this earth, that is what I think I have been led to do because of the past lives I have tapped into through past life regression, hypnosis. And they were rather shocking, to say the least. And I've also met up with friends who have told me that in their own minds, they remember me in past lives as this person or that person. And I thought this is just, amazing. How do you ever confirm something like that? And that's the big question, because I've in various discussions, there has been a concern that we can be fooled into thinking that we were this person or that person. I mean, you say that you have memories of your past lives, and Tommy Sinisi has said he has definite memories of his past lives. But I've only been able to recover mine through hypnosis and through other people.
Yeah, they come in various ways. I've been hypnotized backwards, or past life regressed in Hawaii, and I remembered going back in a pyramid. Some of my best memories were because I was calm and laid down by a professional with a clinical license to do so, on one of my birthdays in Hawaii. So it was important to me. But I tell you, Bruce, once I had that done, it's never left me. I remember it like it was yesterday. So I wonder if those memories are so embedded in our DNA coding that could be unconscious memory coming back up to the top. That's something I'm not sure.
Well,
Dr. Moody approaches that. Go ahead.
You made an important statement, DNA coding, because of the proteins that coat the DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, and turn genes on and off. They are epigenetic. They believe that they are involved in epigenetic memories from a past life. So you need to distinguish between the DNA information that you have inherited from your ancestors and your soul memories of who you may have been, which may not have had anything to do with the genetic line that you're in now as a human.
That's important. Yes, I'm glad we got that today recorded. This is going to be an important data show.
What we do in psychotherapy is we don't really distinguish between, is it a real past life memory or is it in your DNA? It could be both. It could be we regressed a woman and she started reliving being thrown into the gas chambers. She was Jewish. She had been raised on a kibbutz. And when she went under, she immediately went into a primal. She started screaming bloody murder. She screamed for about an hour. And then finally when she got done screaming, we said, "What was that?" And she was recalling that she died in the gas chambers under Hitler,
Oh, wow.
The chambers, right? So, but, we were wondering, well, maybe that's in her DNA, but it wasn't relevant because it affected her to the core of her being. And it's just like, it's irrelevant what it was. Was that you or not you? That was, so they talk about that in psychology and maps and things like that, the professional publication. Are we just accessing our ancestral memories?
Yes.
Or is it ourselves? So I don't know how to distinguish that. But I have done a lot of regression as well. I've done a lot because I married my shrink, and I had a lot of trauma because I had a mother who was very violent. And so in order for me to gain back my life, and it actually put a lot of serious illnesses in, I started to heal from these memories that were making me want to die on a deep soul level. So I'm here because I did intensive therapy. And I would, when I first met Dr. Lessin in 1997, we were doing, like, every weekend, every time we could clear the calendar, we were doing regressions because I was suffering from lung disease and I was dying. And so it was an emergency. So I've been covered a lot of, but then I had spontaneous memories. I attended a weekly meditation class, and this might work for some of the listeners out there. I went to this meditation group, and they did like a tape where they went under with the White Brotherhood. It was some kind of, it was a wonderful meditation regression. The whole group regressed, and then we shared what we got, and that took the whole evening, and then we did it again the following week. Part of that practice was to go home and every day at the same time do a 15-minute meditation. So I chose a certain time after I got home from work, and thank God my husband at the time liked to cook. So while he was cooking, I meditated. And after a year doing this ongoing practice, which was very rigid, I one night got a download. I called a download of 5 or 6 incarnations. And when I woke up the next morning, had to go to work, all these memories were flooding me. And I had a friend, my husband at the time was ultra conservative. He just didn't even believe in this stuff. So I had a friend that was metaphysical, and he met me for lunch. And I felt like I was outside of my body for 2 weeks before I said, I'm not really here. I'm kind of hovering. I felt like I was out of my body, hovering and operating my body from above. And that lasted for like 2 weeks. It was like I had a DMT activation. Later I learned what people do when they do psychotherapy with entheogens and stuff like that. So I had a spontaneous like DMT activation, all these memories coming in, and I had to integrate, and I had to go to work the next day and act normal. So that was very difficult. But anyway,
this is very interesting.
Next person
Janet.
talking. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
What I didn't mention before with Bonnie is that she became a professional hypnotherapist with a partner back in the late 70s. And she had her own business in New Jersey. And I wasn't aware of what this was all about when I met her. She told me about it, etc. But during all that 7 years I was with her, she never asked me if I wanted to be hypnotized. She never did any of that. And I think that the reason was quite simple. She could read my mind. She already knew what she needed to know. And it wasn't until I was with my third wife after Bonnie died that I had my first past life regression. And that was a shocker because I didn't know what to expect. And what was surprising to me was how easy it was, how suggestible I am. And I could be taken back into a past life very quickly and readily. How about you?
Which you? Me or
Janet,
you?
Janet, you said you...
Well, I think if you learn to take direction to be hypnotized, and you can do self-hypnosis, if you learn to relax and recall things, it's beneficial. People who seek these type of classes and these type of learning, these type of therapies, when they're not sick, actually have healthier, psychologically and mentally, they're more healthier lives altogether, which correlates with diseases. So therapy works, even if you're 100% healthy, right? It really helps you to go into and get these information because this is vital information for yourself in your current life. You're going to recall those things that are most relevant for your now, for who you are now. So
one of the interesting things I found out through discussing with Pat, my third wife, she had gone through a process called body electronics, in which uses electricity as well to be able to take you back into a past life. And she remembered very clearly the atomic explosion on Nagasaki. She was a Japanese child in that city when the bomb went off. And she remembered essentially being vaporized at that point.
Wow.
And I was, whoa. And then in one of my past life regressions, I found myself at Pearl Harbor during the Japanese attack. Now I was killed there. I was very young. I had lied about my age, gotten in at age 17, and died on an airfield in Pearl Harbor. And I said, what is the probability of that we would be brought together? I died at Pearl Harbor and she died at Nagasaki. That was wild.
And it's actually not as improbable as you might imagine. You know, we tend to come down in groups. We're going to go down at the same time. We might meet. This is our best chance to meet again. That's what the Life Between Lives books by Dr. Michael Newton says, is that, you know, you might go down because you tend to reincarnate in relationship with one another. Like you might be a boss employee at one time. You might be a parent-child. You might be lovers. You might be, you know, somehow related.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen.
So it sounds like she's brought your children, and that you were here
on the go. Still want to listen? Don't have one of those fancy phones with too many buttons. Don't know what an app is? Or you don't even care? Well, we got you here at Revolution Radio. Now you can dial in 24/7 to listen to our shows. We have a number for Studio A and Studio B, and best of all, it's free. Don't forget, carrier charges for your cell phone provider may apply, though, so check with your cell provider to make sure. So ready? Here you go. And here's the number. Studio A is 712-432-6958, and Studio B is 716-748-0112. Thank you very much for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the number one listener-supported radio station in the world.
She said, we need to get a book on presidents. And we did. And
hey everyone,
during that
it's Barbara Jean Lindsay, the Cosmic Oracle. If you have questions about your past lives or future plans, need answers from the cosmos about your love life or career, or just want to keep your finger on the pulse of the planet, check out my show, The Cosmic Oracle, here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
Looking for a nightcap to fill your listening needs? Come join us on Spaced Out Radio with me, Dave Scott, right here on Revolution Radio. Monday through Friday for 3 hours a night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, we will take you down the supernatural path. From ET contact to the paranormal and all of the spiritual, cryptid, and conspiracy stories in between. You can find us right here on Revolution Radio at spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, and on Facebook at Spaced Out Radio Show. Spaced Out Radio. It's a night of talk and interaction. Are you experienced?
Hello, Karl Marx here. Look at my wonderful hair. Notice how I sweep it back.
Carl?
I call it the 360 sweep. Beard, sideburns, and the magnificent coif.
Carl!
What? What is this?
You're on the radio. They can't see you.
Oh, yeah. I get confused.
Want to learn more about the Marxist agenda and other important stuff? Listen to The Ultimate Remedy with L.B. Bork, Tuesdays 6 p.m. Eastern, right here on Revolution Radio.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Okay. Are we back, Cat Dog Girl?
I'm back.
How much of that last conversation was cut off?
We have no idea. So, anyway, we had just started about, let me do some commercials here. Everybody, this is Revolution Radio, and we are the show called, it's new at 4 to 6. I'm real excited about it. Portal Stargate. And Janet Carol Lessin, who also has 2 more shows with her husband, Dr. Alexander Sasha Philip Lessin, PhD in anthropology, master's in psychology, are here on Sunday and Tuesday. So let me let Janet tell you about those, and we're going to ask you to please donate for Portal Stargate at this day and time, and also for hers. Janet, you're on.
Well, yes, first of all, please remember to go over to revolution.radio and make your donation for this week, because we rely on your donations to bring you shows like this one and to keep the lights on and pay the bills. So we really appreciate you when you go over there and make that donation. So thank you very much. And so, yeah, TJ and I had been doing shows on Revolution together, and so she took a break when her daughter passed, so she's back, and we're very glad she's back with us. And then on Sundays, I work with Dr. Sasha Alec Lessin on Sacred Matrix, 8 to 10 Eastern, and Tuesday, Stargate to the Cosmos, 8 to 10 Eastern. And if anybody out there wants to come on our shows, please drop us an email at aquarianradio@gmail.com, and we'll take a look at what you have to offer and get you on the schedule. So before we left on the break, and we're not sure where we got cut off, but we were going back in time with Bruce to an incarnation he had at the White House. So why don't you just start over with that? So you had the one where you died at Pearl Harbor, and then when you did a regression, you went back to the White House one. So tell us, who were you in the White House?
I don't think I need to tell anybody, really, because when I couldn't figure out who I was, and Carola Van Dusen, who was leading the regression, said that if you're having a problem figuring it out, find a mirror, go to a bathroom, look in the mirror, which I did, and I was staring at a face I didn't recognize, and it was very clear in that mirror. After the regression, I told my wife Pat. She said, "We got to get a book on presidents." And I flipped through that book, and when I came to Woodrow Wilson, that was the face I saw in the mirror. And then I started reading up on his life extensively, and I discovered that if we had been living at the same time, our paths would have constantly crossed. For example, I was born in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, just west of Philadelphia. Wilson first taught at the Bryn Mawr College for Women. And then I worked at Wesleyan University in Connecticut, and Wilson taught at Wesleyan University. I took courses at Princeton University, and Wilson not only took courses at Princeton, but he became the president of Princeton University. And at the time this was happening, I was living in Red Bank, New Jersey, and he took his summer vacations in Long Branch, New Jersey, which is less than 5 miles away. So we had this incredible connectivity. But when I looked at our astrology chart, and he was born on the 28th of December, 1856, just before midnight. Mm-hmm. And I was born at just before sunset on the 31st of August, 1945. And when I looked at our astrology charts, I was shocked to see that all of my stars and planets and sun and moon were on the southwestern side of my chart, and all of his were on the north eastern side of the chart. They were exactly the opposite. The only planet we had in common was Saturn, and all the others were opposite. And I was mentioning this to Sue Whitaker, who was a psychic, a well-known psychic, and a close friend of Linda Moulton Howe, and she said, "You didn't want to have anything to do with that past life." And I said, yes, I became a scientist in this lifetime. In that lifetime, I was a politician. And my mother frequently said to me as I was growing up, "Bruce, you're never going to be a politician." So, apparently that was something I wanted to avoid with a passion, and was one of the reasons why I may have enlisted in the Navy during just before World War II, because I got the very strong sense that I was very troubled by having to send so many tens of thousands of Americans to their death in Europe during World War I.
So Wilson died February 3rd, 1924.
Right.
And he left office in 21. So he only did 3 years after. He was sickly in office. I think, is he the one where his wife Edith ran the White House for a while while he was in the sick bed? Yeah, I remember that. So I have a White House connection too in a past life. So that's very interesting because, and it's really startling when you access and you say I was a famous person, because there's part of you going, yeah, right. You were a famous person.
Exactly.
But the other part's going, well, somebody had to be them, right? So anyway, that's interesting correlation. So I remember very clearly in that meditation group. We were taken into past lives many times in that meditation group, and I recall being a young boy underneath the table when Lincoln was dying.
Oh,
and I was playing with another young boy, and I looked up, and I knew I wasn't the Lincoln's child, but I was another young boy. And I looked up, and I saw Lincoln leave his body, and I saw the soul leave, and I was looking around at all these people in the room on this death watch, and it's like, didn't anybody just see that? Why didn't anybody else just see that? And then I remembered growing up, and I died probably in the early 1920s. There could be a lifetime in between then and coming into the earth in 54. But, yeah, so I was researching this, and I found that the Lincoln children played with 3 other little boys. They had their best friends, and they were about the same age. So it's possible. I'm trying to track that down and see which one lived. And their last name was Taft, which I don't know if they were related to Taft. But this body, Janet Thompson, my maiden name was Thompson, I'm related on my mother's side to Gideon Wells, who was the Secretary of the Navy. And so I remember, I looked at the pictures recently of Lincoln's deathbed ritual, and there's Gideon Wells, who is my current great-great-uncle or whatever. sitting there in the death vigil. So I probably was in the same room with a relative of mine. So what you were saying about how you tend to follow the paths or you have connections with your other incarnations seems to ring true. So, TJ, do you have any feedback or comments on both of our stuff? And do you remember any incarnations before being TJ Morris?
Yeah, I've had a lot of carnations, but let me get Bruce introduced here. Dr. Bruce, you have a degree in chemistry. There's people asking me questions, Dr. Bruce. I need to introduce you in more of a fashion like an author in your degrees. Could you please give us, I know chemistry is one of your degrees, and would you spell pollen, whatever that is?
Palynology. I have a minor in chemistry, a major in biology, and in the postgraduate degrees in paleobotany, which is study of fossil plants, and geology, study of rocks, and palynology, Palynology, the study of fossil spores and pollen. And I used my skills and knowledge in the oil industry during the late 1970s and early 1980s, where I age dated the rocks based on the pollen and spores that they were extracted from the cuttings, the drill cuttings, and told the geologists where they were in time, relative what age rocks they were drilling through.
Carbon based.
Well, no, is based on the assemblage of spores and pollen, because those assemblages constantly change through time. So you just have to match them up like barcode with what was going on at any particular time. Every age and epoch and period within the Earth's history, from the beginning of plants producing spores, has a different assemblage in it. So you just have to match up the species, recognize the species, and then figure out when they all existed together. And it's the same for paleobotany or vertebrate paleontology, and being able to age date rocks based on the fossils they contain.
Very interesting, your background in this reality, in this life.
Very different from what I'm doing now. Very different.
Interdimensional thoughts. We've really graduated into this consciousness that we allowed, like Janet was saying, past lives, but I wanted to get in the reality that this is how people would recognize you based on the fact that we call you doctor, and they want to classify. And they said it doesn't matter to them. They were just wondering because they were talking about you're a historian and a very interesting man. So I'm glad I'm getting some very good comments. Thank you, Revolution.
Another point I wanted to make. Another point I would like to bring out here is that in my description of discovering that I may have been Woodrow Wilson, he's the only president in the United States that ever had a PhD. And
how about that?
Yeah, and on top of that, he had to do a lot of traveling up and down the East Coast, from Virginia all the way up to Connecticut and Massachusetts. And during that time period in the early 1900s, most of the routes that he would take will probably be on the rail, and the train tracks would pass through road cuts and through the various rocks of the Newark basins up and down the East Coast. And I know from what I recovered from my past life regression is that he was fascinated by those rocks. And when he got to Wesleyan University, they had a huge collection of dinosaur tracks and other fossil fishes at Wesleyan. I know that because I worked there and I saw them. And they have many of the slabs of red rock with dinosaur tracks hanging from walls in that university. And he was very interested in that, but didn't have any time to deal with that. That was one thing he wanted to know. And lo and behold, in this lifetime, that is my specialty, on the Newark supergroup and studying the rocks and the fossils of the Newark basins. So I satisfied that itch, that curiosity.
You should write a book on your past lives. And now, Janet, what was your question? Because I just wanted to get Dr. Bruce introduced to everyone that was asking me questions.
Yeah,
so
I was looking at the chat. When we went live, my internet went down, and I couldn't pull up what I had written about them. That's why I forgot to. I didn't draw attention, the internet just went down. I can't read it, so I just said, okay, let's just start talking. Anyway, I ad-libbed. I just wanted to add, at Penn State, I worked for the Northeast Watershed Research Division, and we would pull these large, they were like pipes, inside of the pipes of dirt that went down way, they were like 10, 12 feet, 15 feet long, 20 feet long. And then we would analyze the different levels of the soil and the rocks.
Right, their cores.
The cores, yes.
The cores, right. Yeah, I was part of the largest coring project in U.S. history, funded by the National Science Foundation. Cost well over $1.5 million to drill 7 core holes in the Newark Basin and recover 28,000 feet of core. I was the well site geologist, and I had to describe every inch of those cores. And
now, did you do any of that core work at Penn State? Because they had those, tons of them. I mean, they were just stacked all over the place, these cores.
And I was just a graduate student there learning geology at that time.
Okay, what year was that again? I was there
from 72 to 77.
So I was there from 89 to 93. So anyway, some of those cores may have been gathered when you were there, but that was interesting. Okay, so back to our question, which was we were back in past lives. So I was just about to ask you. Now, I'm not talking about your ancient stuff. We're going more current. So anyway, I remembered being a young man. I remember seeing where I was with my wife. We had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. We were by a little small lake with weeping willows, a big white swan. The meadow had a bunch of wildflowers, very magical, and she was dressed in a white dress, and it was just like something out of a movie. And I remembered this scene. And then I had a girlfriend when I was 15, and she was 16, and we hung out together, and then she got married and moved away, and then years later we reconnected, and she said, oh, by the way, that past life you told me about when you were in the meadow with your wife and 3 children, I was the woman. And I didn't want to tell you that I remembered being the woman because we weren't in that type of relationship. We weren't gay. We were just 2 teenagers that hung out together and used to sing and play the guitar. So my question to you two is, so you connected with somebody that you knew from a past life. TJ, what was your most recent, and you might have had other past lives when you were a baby and you died stillborn or whatever. We're not talking about that. Your last full-on incarnation where you kind of got a chance to grow up or at least be old enough to, develop intelligence. What was your most recent incarnation before T.J. Morris that you recall? And do you know anybody from that incarnation in this life?
Not in this life. I meet people that I've known in past lives, some in Hawaii, and I was able to read different things that came up that I know people other than you, but I don't know that one story, of course, I did that Atlantis Oracle where I have all those past lives, but I don't go into the detail, Janet, but the ones that I like the most are the most ancient ones because it seems like I was closer to divinity and deity in the oldest, and then the newer ones seem to be more AI. And I wouldn't, if it's in the now, I wouldn't say it's the future, but if we're living in the now, in the past and present now, but the ones that I live now are in this reality when I go into dream state and lucid dreaming, which is a whole nother part of the ascension age with the awakening of all of us to the reality that the essence and the different threads of energy are thinning in all of us as we level up. So
Go back into a past life that you do remember, even if it is ancient. I just don't know your whole story, but I just wondered if you did have a recent one. Go ahead.
One of the ones I found out in Hawaii in the 80s was when I was an Indian and we came over from North Carolina to Oklahoma, and I made it all the way to Oklahoma, and I've retraced that in this reality, and the flowers were beautiful, and the buffalo, there was this really deep gorge, and I had to go to this certain place. I couldn't find it now if I had to, but I had to go there when I came from Hawaii over here to see it because it was such a visual. And I just laid down in the flowers and died. I was a young girl. I know in this life I wanted to be a boy really bad, and that's why I think in this life I became an investigator and joined the Navy and, traveled the world and then drove a truck 8 years cross country. And, I did all man jobs and law enforcement. But one of the ones that's, of course, my Egyptian memories and past lives as an oracle, that's the one I'm trying to communicate with now, is the Cosmos Ambassador, which is why I think the government had me work with Tom through the Pentagon, was in this reality was as a Cosmos Ambassador because of the secret space program or the, UFO secret space program. Because in this reality, all of that is crossing over into this reality. So that's the part I'm talking about, how we can't see all our life right here. We're multidimensional on one level and probably delusional on another. But if you've ever stood under a UFO, you know that light bends around the spacecraft, so you can't see it. So it's like learning Einstein and how they learned a lot of the quantum physics, So in this reality, now Russian, I had one that is haunting me because I was a woman. The men parts, like back when y'all were talking earlier about the White House and Civil War, I've told you about, how I was a little Confederate boy, and I was with the photographer that took the picture of Abraham Lincoln, and then the little boy was with another one, little boy, which I thought was you because of the vibration of the energy, but we haven't really discussed that lifetime. But
so I was a little boy back in those times, and so we might have crossed paths because I was a part of Lincoln's household. The Taft boys always played with the Lincoln boys. There were 3 of them, and there were 3 Lincoln boys. So you're saying you were a Confederate?
Yeah, I somehow I was a Confederate, but now when in this reality, when I was born in Monroe, Louisiana, right across from Jackson, Mississippi, there was a big Vicksburg, Mississippi. Excuse me. There was a big battle fought there, but when they put I-20 through there, I remember my parents got really, really weirded out because I started crying when Mother explained to me why the construction was up there and they were putting the interstate through. So it was a past life memory, but my mother had no knowledge. They didn't talk like that, in the 50s, so she couldn't understand why I was crying about the Civil War and the people in the I-20 being put through in the early 60s. But I remember it was very traumatic memories, and I remember saying, but I knew a lot of stuff, but Mother, she didn't know how to say, God, she must have had a past life here or something. She didn't say that to my father, but it was like that energy. She just was like, oh my God, I remember it was very traumatic to me, and my mother, recalling it. Now, the one in Russia I had was a woman that was she influenced Russia, and she helped her people. And I was a potato farmer, but it was all about helping the suffrage of the people, and I was very important. And I used to know her name, and I found her picture once, which was me. And I don't know what happened to that life, but it just one of the many that were somewhat important, but not very, but it's a memory in my. And they're the ones that I guess I'm searching for the pieces in this reality. I wonder if we all do that, but it becomes an emotion that you want to complete. Does that make sense?
It's unfinished. It's unfinished business. So let me ask you one more question. Then I got one for Bruce. So you said you were with the photographer. Now, that photographer took that famous picture of Andrew Basiago when he time traveled back, and he was there during the Gettysburg Address. So do you think you were there at the Gettysburg Address?
I was standing on a podium with the photographer, but I used to think I was the photographer. But all I know is I've got the memory. So there's two memories. One when I was small, and I remember being in a civil. I wasn't supposed to be, but I was a boy. That's why I wanted to remember it, because very few times, all the ones I seem to remember is like a woman working with Tecumseh. I was an Indian woman. I usually remember women. So this little boy was very important to me during the Civil War. But I seemed to be hiding at the lines. I have a memory of hiding in the lines, and I snuck over, but I was like a spy, which makes sense being that I became investigator and in and out of country in this life. It sort of makes sense to me, like an unfulfilled prophecy or something. You know what I mean? Like working both sides. I seem to remember standing there, but with a photographer, that was a very important day for me. I don't know what that was, but it was very, very important that I get from the lines, change my clothes. And it seemed like I was posing as a little boy or girl with a photographer, but it's sketchy, but it just seems like one of those things. Let's see. Hiro wants to know something.
Go ahead, Hiro.
Bruce, do you see the micro and the macro as above, so below through your studies? Now, which studies, Hiro? Just in all with, because he's been listening to you and he didn't want to miss any of it when I asked him to go find out who was on Studio A while we're on Studio B. So here's the question. Great, TJ and Janet, but I really want to know Bruce's response to my previous question. Does Bruce see the micro and the macro, the as above, so below, through his studies? Now, I can't get any plainer.
I see a mathematical connection all the way through it, yes. There is this reflection, this repetition at different levels. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, because it went silent at your end.
Micro and macro. So he means microcosm and macrocosm, from the, I guess, quantum physics to the smallest to the largest, grandest scale, because we've for years talked about all of that. So how would you place it
all
together?
Connected by mathematics, and numbers. And that is the threads that connect everything. I've been frequently very amazed at just how numbers can predict things. Such that there are equations that you can use with taking a small sampling of data of, let's say, the size of fishes in a fish catch, and determine what the total range of size of those fishes will be. Now, how is that possible, especially when the equation uses pi, 3.14, etc., in that equation? And why is it that the relationship between the distance of the moon from the Earth and the sun from the Earth is a common relationship? That it falls into a mathematical pattern, and a lot of things on this planet fall into similar patterns that are predictable and can be determined through math. And that makes it sound almost as if everything is pre-done, preset.
Good answer. And Hiro has a PhD in mathematics in the UK. I don't know if that's equal to yours in chemistry, but his background is mathematics, but he's very humble about, he doesn't teach anymore. He's just a good friend of ours, but he's very deep, he's very cosmological, and we know that he's had many past lives or future lives or in the now, but he's very highly intelligent, but not everybody understands him. So,
and I have a piece of synchronicity. I just for Christmas I bought a little hippie bedspread. It has a printed pattern. I just put it on this morning, and it says, "As above, so below; as within, so without; as the universe, so the soul." So I just put this on my bedspread on my bed this morning. I didn't know what it said until I opened it up.
Hey, Bruce,
yes.
if Hyro has Hyro, do you want to come on for a minute and talk to Bruce? He has a high level of intelligence in mathematics. I would be most curious, wouldn't you, Janet? If Hyro could.
Sure, it sounds good. Yeah, we have about a half an hour before the end of the show. If you can get him on, yeah.
Yeah.
You need his Skype or something.
Yeah, he's a friend of mine. Hyro, do you want to come on? I think I can find you. If you do, I don't know how do you get out of this? Can you still do this and pull up the Skype screen, Hyro? I can try it. Let me see. I don't know how multitasking I can be, Hyro, but we're going to try.
Well, Hyro can hear you. He can just sign in.
Oh, yeah, he's signed in. But let's see. He says his math, I need more than the studies. Hyro, did you hear me? Do you want to come on? Do you want to be a speaker with Bruce Direct? If you'll have to type it in here.
Yeah, he's not responding.
Let's see.
He may be taking a bathroom break for all we know. We don't know. All right. Well, let's continue. Right. Just type that into him, and then we'll ask another question. If he responds, we'll bring him in. Let me go back to our questions we had. Hold on.
Yes.
Yeah. Just so we don't have dead airspace.
I have a question for both of you.
Yes, go ahead.
You both indicated that in your past life recovery knowledge, that you've been both male and female. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because I've run into a number of people with past lives that either they're only one gender or the other, not both.
I tend to be female more often than not. But two of the most critical lifetimes relevant to this lifetime, I was male. I was male during the storming of the Bastille, and I died I ran into the Bastille, and then I was in a battle there, and I ran up to the top level, and I fell to my death. But I reconnected with the two other people in that episode, and they both were lovers of mine in this lifetime.
Wow.
And I shared recollections with them about that lifetime. And that when I was born into this lifetime, I kept recreating that fall from when I was in the Bastille to my death, but I didn't hit the ground. I left my body before I hit the ground, and then I reunited with two people. We were laughing about how we just died. We just died. It was like a huge adventure, right? So we were kind of laughing, and we went on to the other side. So I connected with those. One was my second husband, and he used to...
When you fell, your body died. Like you were still.
Hi, this is Hyro, folks.
Sorry, Hyro. I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's quite interesting. So when you hit the ground, which is unusual in that thing, you fell, and like you were still aware of yourself. You were still yourself, and there were others and just laughing at the game. What happened?
I left my body before I hit the ground. I said, I'm out of here, like on a soul level, said, I'm not hitting the ground, and I left. And as I immediately popped out of my body, I was reunited with my two best friends from that lifetime. One was male and one was female. I was lovers with the female, and we were both lovers it was a long story. We're both lovers with this female, and we both wanted to marry her. So we loved each other as friends, but we were in competition with each other. So we were laughing hysterically. So when I came to this lifetime, my lover, Ed, let's just call him Ed, he was a fencer. He was an avid fencer. He would go to those things where you recreate what do they call those groups where they go to the parks and they dress up in costume, they recreate historic episodes. So he was in one of those groups that recreated things. What do they call that? There's a name for it. And then my husband, I ended up marrying the woman, but in this lifetime, he was male and I was female. But he used to grab his neck really weird, and I noticed that at first, and I said to him in this lifetime, I said, oh, you're not going to lose your head this time. It's like when he grabbed his neck, and he wouldn't let me touch his neck, it's just like a memory came, and he just freaked out when I made the connection. I said, "Oh, you're not going to lose your head this time," because in that lifetime he got beheaded. Because we were all fighting the revolution. We were in the revolution, which was, I guess, led into the American Revolution. So we were doing stuff over there, rebelling. We were living in the woods and fighting and coming in town and fighting and then escaping back to the woods. So I got all these memories back. So I met 2 characters from that. I talked to Ed extensively about it. But my second husband, he just didn't believe in anything that wasn't, very conservative. He was very, very ultra-conservative. But he did have an emotional reaction to it.
This one? Why did you get rid of him? What, did he annoy you or something? What did he do?
Oh, I was very bad. I had an affair. I met the man on the internet, and we fell in love. I couldn't take the rigidity of my husband at the time. He was just
everything
ultra conservative.
Janet, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Everything about this life is it's like very limiting. I was saying that earlier in chat. I can tell that you don't actually come from here, and it's limiting. Everything is so limiting for you. I mean, you're almost like bursting constantly.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that observation. I know it's really hard to find people that can talk like TJ and I can talk, and like we can talk on this show, because that's what I'm finding is like, quote unquote, the reality is this extended, like we're talking today, with Bruce.
We can also
it's way beyond this 3D physicality. Yeah. Go ahead.
So Bruce and I, we're both PhDs, right? I'm ex-PhD. That's what I say, Bruce, because I can't remember anything I was doing in mathematics at that time. Nothing. It's ridiculous. Wow. But I can still remember how to think, and that's what I sensed when I was listening to you speak a lot of sense. It's not based on the knowledge that you put into it. It's not listen and repeat in your mind. That's what I was hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you were saying that what I was talking about was from a broader memory. Is that correct? Rather than specific information that I gained from my studies.
Yeah, you came from a broader memory, even broader than that, and you were good at focusing it and passing exams. But you come from a much bigger thing than that, and that's what you really are, and that's what I sense from you.
Interesting. Yes, that is one thing that I've been trying to understand more about. Who am I? I can figure out through my past lives that I've been coming back and playing certain roles, that most of my major past lives were directed towards some objective, some desired end. And while there were other lives which weren't significant at all, as Janet was mentioning with some of her past lives. I was shocked, for example, when I was discussing our past lives with my third wife, Pat. She was telling me, about how she had remembered in a special regression that she had died in the atomic explosion in Nagasaki.
I don't know what's the matter with you people. Third wife, Janet's on number 2 or 3. What's the matter with you people? What's wrong with the first ones? And I can take also.
I wish I would only be married once.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be rude. Janet, also, if I was falling down off a cliff and I was going to splat on the ground, I would not be saved by my best friends. They'd just watch me splat on the ground, and that's it. Over.
Oh, they weren't in the room when I left my body. They had already been killed. So when I left my body, we met in between, and then we left together to go on to the other side. That was it. But I wanted to, so I think people die sometimes. I think Bruce's wife died, so that's why he's on. My first husband used to beat me, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I'm sorry, I'm out of here. So there's always, it's difficult.
You contain a huge amount of revenge in you, Janet.
I don't revenge. I don't revenge. No, there's no revenge. It's all perfect. I wouldn't be who I was if if I didn't experience what I did. I'm the sum total of all my experiences, and I've come to love myself. And
you're way stronger than me, and you're way stronger than me. I'll be there with the piano wire. I would. Do you know the film Piano Wire?
Piano. I don't know the Piano Wire film. It sounds awful.
I'm going to tell you, I watch a lot of sci-fi and horror films. So there's one where it's so amazing. Actually, Piano Wire, Revenge.
No, I don't like that visual. Erase that image.
Well, we're writing a book. Hyro, you'll be in it. This is our book, Portal Stargate. So Janet and I are the main characters, but we're bringing Bruce and Hyro into our reality. Remember, was it you said that we're all living it right now? This is the now, past, present, and future, right?
Right.
Yes.
Hyro, one of the things that
the nows of in the 70s and the 80s and the 60s. This now is incredible. Sorry, go ahead.
You brought up the question of my wives, multiple wives. Every one of my 4 wives was chosen for me. In fact, it was very clearly chosen for me. In fact, I met my first and second wives on the same day, 300 feet apart, within a matter of 20 minutes apart. And I married them 13.5 years apart. And that all was brought together at that particular time. Even my third wife, Pat, I was specifically asked after Bonnie died by discarnate voices, are you ready to meet the next woman in your life? And when I thought yes, the voice said, will you accept the woman we have in mind for you? And when I said yes, but I wanted to see who this woman was, a portal opened up in broad daylight outside, and I was looking into another dimension with an all-white modern kitchen with modern appliances, and a woman dressed in black sitting at a round kitchen table. And I felt that she was too far away to see her clearly, and I felt my consciousness, spirit, being pulled out of my body, passed through that portal, and I was hovering over her head. And when I thought I had seen enough, I felt my spirit being sucked back into my body, and I watched the portal close. That was on a Friday night. On the Monday when I went back to work, walking down the hall, a coworker at Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory came out of her office, Connie Sanchetta, and she says, oh, Bruce, I'm glad I caught you. Can I ask you a personal question? I said, sure. She said, are you dating anybody? And I said, no. And then she told me about this a fast friend from college that she had been talking to over the weekend, and she realized that we had a lot in common. She wanted to play matchmaker. Make a long story short, I ended up meeting her. She was the woman sitting at that table. And she said, at the same time I was being asked, she was asked, are you ready to meet the next man in your life? And she said yes. And that's how we got together. It was good old Evie Logan's alien love bite. We were brought together.
More than your PhDs, right? You probably have more than one, yeah?
No, just one, a master's and a PhD.
Your bloodline. Your bloodline. That's what's happening.
Yes. Yes, probably.
Dr. Cornet?
Yes.
We have some questions here with the regards to the DNA, and you were talking about DNA encoding earlier about me in this show. But some people want to know why is it some people in their DNA or past lives can remember? Why is it royalty? And that's gotten to be one of the questions that people repeat over and over because they hear it on a lot of radio shows or in magazines. Do you have since your degree is in chemistry, but you said something about the coding of the DNA and how some of us remember our past lives while some know it's in our DNA. Well, and you said there's a difference. And I do know there is because I live it. Can you explain it, please?
Well, first off, I just wanted to make sure that the audience knows that my PhD is in geology, not chemistry.
Geology.
Geology. Also, I've had an extensive DNA analysis done through Ancestry.com. And I've also had an extensive genealogy done by my relatives from a number of generations that go back, and they both concur exactly. And it's interesting that you raised the question of royalty, because all of my genetic ancestors were British or French royalty. Every one of them. I'm from 3 different lineages, de Burgh, de Flegg, and Cornet, all in the 12th century England at that time, when England still spoke French. And what is interesting is that I'm directly a descendant of Herbert de Burgh, Sir Herbert de Burgh, who was the Chief Justice of England and Ireland in the 14th century. So I found that to be very fascinating, and the DNA analysis complemented that completely. So I can actually say that, based on my genealogical history, that one of my ancestors came over on the Mayflower, and
evil, Bruce, evil.
Evil. Yes. You asked the question, why did I get chosen?
England was called Mercia before, and the first king of England was French. So we would have been speaking French. He's right.
And all of my de Burgh, de Flegg, and Cornet are all French names. French origin.
Well, here's one. I Am Lone Frog is helping us out here. He said, bloodline does not predict behavior, just like a number and age doesn't lock you into an idea. Come on, man. Unless, of course, you're hardcore incest. But how do we explain the difference? So some of us do have DNA in us, and otherwise we wouldn't be a certain color of melanin in our skin that we're not necessarily choosing, or are we, when we come here? That's another one of those big ones. Did we choose to come here and choose what culture, what family? And some people in the LDS church believe that, and some believe that they'll go on to be royalty when they leave here. They're just passing through.
It is
what
about,
do you believe about
it's like ancestry.com. He doesn't need to do that. He should already know. Bruce, sorry to speak of you in third person there. He already knows that, right? But you can't just check by what your hair's like and what your skin color is. I'm sorry that Obama he's not at all black. He simply has melanin in his skin. He's not at all like a black person. Do you understand what I'm saying? That could be by training, but he would have been chosen because of bloodline. And none of those people are in there without bloodline.
I agree with you that it would be horrible if I was chosen simply because of my bloodline. Okay, because there is no direct connection. I mean, how many generations have there been since the turn of the first millennium? I mean, my ancestors owned castles, and they sold them and went and fought in the Crusades. I've gotten that much information back, and I didn't need Ancestry.com to tell me that. So, look at me now.
So
it's complicated.
That is interesting because what Frog is basically saying is it nurture or nature? When you have a tendency of your blood, your DNA, it's both. Go on, Jen.
Well, I have traced back to royalty, and then I've had past lives, and I'm going the same thing. What is it? But there is some genetic connection, and it all goes back to the Anunnaki. So, what are the royals? They're just it's a ultimate racism, right? It's like who has this special DNA from the Anunnaki, from the extraterrestrials.
Well,
are they better? Not really. All souls are equal, but these are just vehicles that we, avatars
we are
that we
the
incarnate
vessels.
into. We're the vessels, right. But there is a soul signature that aligns with the genetic signature. And so the souls tend to reincarnate back into the families that both a soul family and a genetic family. And then Penny Brady was saying she did the genetics back, and she said that in her ancestry research, they kept cycling back and marrying each other. So like third, fourth cousins would just keep remarrying each other, but they were far enough removed to not be incestuous. So you take the British culture. I was watching YouTube. It says that the UK British culture, we're all related about 20 times over. So I'm from the UK. So Bruce, we're related, and I'm also French. So we're probably, if we go back far enough and do our ancestry, we'll find where we intertwine with each other. And my ancestors came over on the Mayflower, and there's apparently about 1 million descendants of the Mayflower colonies. And then I have some that came from the Roanoke, Virginia colony. So, it's 6 degrees of separation. We're related over and over and over again. But what I'm interested in is, and we're running out of time, is what did you do at Woodrow Wilson? Because that's karmic. That's recent history. That's our current. And Woodrow Wilson was a complicated person. And I think if I recall, he set up the agendas for what's coming down now, like for World War I, II, and III. So you've got a big karma on your hands, boy.
Yes. Oh, boy, do I ever. And that was one of the reasons
why. Tell us about that.
Right. Well, you do realize that he thought that he was destined to become president. I mean, he was born on the 28th of December, and 28 was his magic number. He was first married when he was 28. He was nominated for the governorship on the 28th ballot, and he became the 28th president. 28 was his magic number. Interestingly enough, 831 or 138 is my magic number. That's my birthday number as well. And I've felt that I've had a predestination, just like he felt. And he says this very clearly in his biographers relate that information about him, that he was born in Staunton, Virginia, and his father was a minister, and he went to Princeton University, and he graduated there, and then went to Johns Hopkins University, where he got his doctorate. Then he came back to Princeton University and taught as a professor, became president of that university. Then he was encouraged to run for office, and he became the governor of New Jersey. And then he was encouraged to run for president, and he became the 28th president. And I feel that he sensed that his life was on a mission, and he couldn't vary from it. And I felt that the life I've been on and the things that I've done have been similarly controlled. Many times I've thought that I'm like a horse. I'm blinkered, saddled, cinched, and bridled, and I'm supposed to go only in a certain direction.
We're going to be out of a minute, so they're going to cut us off in 4 minutes. But just you'll have to look up that 14 points for the League of Nations there, and he got a Nobel Prize in 1920 for his efforts, for the League of Nations. But the Congress did not approve the U.S. joining the League of Nations. So Wilson toured the nation to hopefully speak up for the League of Nations in the Peace Treaty of Versailles, or Versailles.
Yeah, and the weird thing about that, in 1963, I went to my French class, Versailles. I went to France for the summer, and on our way back from Cannes, we stopped at Paris, and we had a side trip to Versailles, and I was standing in the hall where the treaty was signed, and I had one hell of a flashback.
Wow. How about that?
Yeah, Woodrow Wilson was in that hall, and I was standing in that hall. Oh, my God. And I took pictures of it.
That's what I was telling you about, trying to put together some memories in your past lives in this life. It could be karma fixing or something. We'll start next week, folks. Ro, you didn't get to speak much on who you are and what you are, but maybe we can have you back, folks. That's 4 to 6, Portal Stargate. And this is Dr. Bruce Cornet speaking to you about his past lives and Woodrow Wilson days, with Janet Carol Lessin speaking of her past lives. And Hyro, what's your last name? What do you go by? Egypt or UK or?
28 is the birthday I was born on, TJ. And my numbers are 7. I do everything in 7s. Just give you that.
You were born on the 28th?
Yes.
This is freaky. So is Woodrow Wilson.
This is freaky. That's cute.
Freaky.
We're freaky kind of people. Bruce, I would say that we're proud space nerds. So, folks, we're Big Bang Theory kind of people. Hyro, would you fit into that? Do you like space? You're a Star Trekian. I know you're a cosmonaut.
I don't fit into anything, but like freaky does fit.
You do freaky space solutions. Yeah.
Yes, and Janet, I actually wore a pocket protector for my pens and slide ruler when I was in college.
Wow.
I am a classic nerd.
You are the nerd. We're fixing to be off. So everybody in the chat room, please join us. Janet will be back here
next Thursday. I'll be back Sunday. I'll see you Sunday.
Yeah, Sunday. Look for us with a Mad Painter on Sundays and Mondays, please. A Mad Painter, and that's on Studio A with Janet Carol Lessin. On Stargate to the Cosmos Tuesday, and Sacred Matrix on Sunday, right, Janet?
Right. Yes, that's right.
And look for me on TJ Mars ET Radio with a Mad Painter 2 tomorrow night. And Hyro, you're welcome to come back tomorrow night. Dr. Bruce Cornet will be bringing us some people from El Paso, UAP people. Thank you, everybody, and I guess that is the end of the show. It says,
TJ, it's been a pleasure speaking to all of you. A pleasure speaking to all of you, and much love. But namaste.
Thank you.
My higher love. You as well, Janet. You know I love you. So
I love you too,
higher loves your higher self. Okay.
Love, love, love. Aloha.
Great to have you on the show, Hyro. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah. I think we're still on right now, but the only way I can tell is to hit this button. So people, like,
I think you have to hang up so next people can get on.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Hey, aloha. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. Great show. Thank you.
Right back after this message.
Hello, all you good-looking people out there in Revolution Radio. This is Mario. I invite you to join me Thursdays at 6 o'clock for This, That, and the Other. It's a show about you, it's a show about me, but ultimately it's a show where we try to have a little bit of fun. We discuss important topics, and we do our best to be apolitical. So I invite you, put on your favorite pair of comfy sweats, your smoking jacket, and grab a beverage of your choice, and join me Thursday evenings at 6 o'clock. For This, That, and the Other on Revolution Radio.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
Extendivite really works. Just listen to what some people have to say.
Several years ago, I was developing a very severe situation. I called it my flippy heart. It was doing not good things, and I did not want to go to a medical doctor because I just knew they would give me a cover-up pill. I didn't want to get onto that sort of thing at all. When I learned it was garlic and cayenne, and cayenne is a healer. It is a wonderful herb. I said, I think I'm onto something here. I'll tell you, I wouldn't be without it. It did wonderful things for me.
Extendivite is only $69.95 for a 2-month supply of either capsules or liquid. Call now. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendovite.
The opinions opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host,